We are back for the first time. I don't even know if we're back. First show of Cross Island Podcast. I'm your host, Errol Marks. My co-host, Gillen. We are here, as always. We're going to do this every single Monday, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go through all the sports of here in New York, and we're going to get through everything. We're going to go through the Jets, the Giants. When the Islanders season starts, we'll get through the Islanders, the Rangers, the Knicks, obviously the Brooklyn Nets, and whenever the Yankees and the Mets start again, I don't know if we want to speak about them, but maybe this offseason will be a little bit better than this season. Lyle, what's up, man?
Nothing much. Really looking forward to getting everything started and running.
Well, I'm here, you're here, and why don't we get into it? I will say this, and I'm going to speak a lot about the New York Jets on my show. Obviously, it will be airing tomorrow. We're not doing a show on Wednesday. We will get into the New York Jets and the New York Giants and throughout the league with Speedy and all the different guests that we're going to have on the show. But happy to be here, and I definitely want to get into the Jet game yesterday. And to me, watching the Jet game, and there was a lot of things that happened in the game that just threw me off, but one thing that really threw me off early in the game was the play calling by the New York Jets. They started off slow. Zach Wilson made a couple of mistakes. They weren't throwing the ball. They were running the ball. We saw that Breece Hall obviously had his breakout game. We saw last year Breece Hall had his breakout game against the Broncos and then obviously hurt his knee, tore his ACL, and he was playing good football. But that game, he had this, I think it was a 68-yard run. He had a 72-yard run for a touchdown in this game, but he didn't tear his ACL. He had close to 200 yards. He had one of his, if not his best NFL game, and he looked fantastic, Lyle.
Yeah, he did. He definitely looked great. Looked like the Breece Hall of last year. Hopefully that's a trend that continues, and hopefully they can also get Cook going, so then they can have a good 1-2 punch.
Absolutely. When you look at the Jets and everything over the last couple of weeks, especially the Kansas City week, and I will say this, looking at what Robert Saleh did at the end of the game, going crazy and speaking to the referees and really pushing himself out there in front of the fans and really proposing that the referees were on the Kansas City Chiefs side. And then throughout the week, everybody was talking about the Jets getting cheated. And then going into this game in Denver, and a lot of people thought this was Nathaniel Hackett's game, obviously against Sean Payton. Everything was coming to this game. And it threw a lot of people off because you thought that the Jets were going to start off even faster than they did. And it was really the Broncos that took off early in the game. They had the early touchdown, and they played better than the Jets in the first quarter. And that's been the Jets' mark throughout the season, is they started off in the first quarter just getting killed by everybody. You watched the Kansas City Chiefs game; they were down 17-0 in the first quarter. Then they started playing better football. In the second half, the Jets really take over. If you look at what the Jets have done in the second half, it's been absolutely amazing. I mean, defensively, the way they've played, they didn't have DJ Reed in the game. And because of a concussion protocol, they bring in Bryce Hall. Bryce Hall, that was pretty much put on the practice squad, was brought up and then started in a game that a lot of people thought was going to be a Broncos game. They were favorites, obviously. I think they were a 3-point favorite in the game going into the game, being that they were home and winning the week before that against, to me, a very bad team, the Chicago Bears. But then again, you look at what the Jets have done. The Jets showed up and they played a fantastic second half like they've done all season long. If they can play 4 quarters, the Jets could be a very hard team to beat.
I fully agree, and it's night and day. You look at what they did in the second half, and I think it started in the Cowboys game. They got blown out in the first half. Second half, I think they let up 6 points in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go to the Patriot game, they did the same thing. Then against Kansas City, all they did was let up 2 field goals, another 6 points.
Mm-hmm.
And then yesterday, they just didn't let up anything until that touchdown at the end of the game, which that really bothered me because you had that 2-point conversion and they called the holding on the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the next drive the Jets had, on the interception, the same exact situation where he grabs him up high, they didn't call holding on that. Because if he didn't hold him, Garrett Wilson would have been able to cut into that pass, get into it, and catch it right in front of him. But 13 held him, didn't let him get to it, intercepted, and they didn't call anything. I felt like watching that. That was the exact same play that happened the drive before, and they didn't call that.
You know what?
And
You know what stood out to me was Zach Wilson. It's like I said in the first half, he wasn't throwing the ball. They ran the ball, ran the ball, ran the ball. I think he threw the ball 5 times in the first half, and then in the second half, they opened up the playbook for him. And I don't know, I don't understand Nathaniel Hackett doing this early in the game. I think that they need to get him going early in the game, push him early in the game, make him make the throws. And then in the second half, 19 for 26, 199 yards, 0 touchdowns. He did throw that interception that he threw to Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, to me, was being held, and that was the reason why it was intercepted by Surtain. But nevertheless, I think Zach needs to be careful with the ball. He dropped the ball a couple times. Thank God it didn't cost them, but it was a very sloppy game. Very, very sloppy game. Gibson dropping the ball on the punt. There was a lot of mistakes that the Jets made, but the Denver Broncos are so bad. No matter how many mistakes the Jets made, and no matter how many mistakes that the Broncos made, the game was even closer than anybody thought it was going to be. Because I thought the Jets in the second quarter, actually in the third quarter, when Breece Hall had that early 72-yard touchdown, I thought they were going to take off. I think they were going to pull away. And then a lot of things started to happen. They lost Elijah Vera Tucker. Now he's out with a torn Achilles for the rest of the season. Again, against the same team in the same place in Denver. He tore his pec last year. Now he tore his Achilles this year. He's out for the season, just like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron thinks he still can come back. I don't see Elijah Vera Tucker coming back no matter what he does. This is a 300-pound lineman who is going to need a lot of rehab to fix that torn Achilles. And here's another thing. You thought that you were going to lose Mekhi Becton. He came back twice in the game. Yes. And then they lost Tippmann. I don't know how long Tippmann is going to be out. I think he hurt his ankle, but it's not a bad – I don't think it was a bad injury, so I think Tippmann will be back either next week or the week after. So, I mean, when you look at the Jets right now, they're going into a game against the Philadelphia Eagles, a team they've never beaten in the regular season, and they need to play better in the first half. If they don't start off strong in the first half, they're going to be in a lot of trouble when they go and play the Eagles.
That Eagles are probably the worst matchup for the Jets. They have a dominant offensive line. They have a very good defensive line. And with the Jets' weakness on the offensive line, I think that defensive line can really destroy them. The way we saw the Cowboys and the Patriots defensive lines and linebackers really take out any opportunity that Zach Wilson had to play the game. And you mentioned how they weren't passing the ball in the first half, and it felt like watching it how they were trying to force Breece Hall into the game. They had the first drive or the first couple drives where they threw the ball a little bit, and then they just stopped, and they just gave him the ball the entire time, and it didn't allow Zach to have a rhythm, and they have to get it to a point sooner in the game where both Breece and Zach can have a good, steady rhythm so that they can do the play action. They can do all those things and open up the defense and force them to give space to the running game. And it felt like they were just trying to force the running game, and it just felt like an awkward game at the beginning.
I think the 2-minute drill should be played by the New York Jets the whole game for Zach Wilson. Rushing the ball, rushing him up to the line. They made a lot of mistakes. They did. And even at the end of the second quarter, when all Zach needed to do with 7 seconds left was run to the line and obviously, kneel or whatever, drop the ball or whatever, hike the ball and then kick the field goal. And it would have given them at least another 3 points. They would have went down. They would have only been down by 2 points going into the second half, even though it didn't make a difference in the second half, the way the Jets played. I just believe that there was a lot of mistakes. And the only reason why the Jets won the game and beat the Denver Broncos is because the Broncos are a worse team. Breece Hall had a sensational game, 22 carries, 177 yards, 8 per average, 1 touchdown. He had a breakout game, almost 200 yards. Then you have Zach Wilson. He ran the ball pretty well. He ran for 3 carries, 26 yards, 8.7 a carry. Dalvin Cook didn't he wasn't being used as well as the Jets should be using him. Dalvin Cook, for a guy that was one of the best running backs, top 6, top 7 running back in the league last year for the Minnesota Vikings, in the last 2 games, he's averaged 20 yards. 20 yards in a game doesn't help when you thought you had a two-headed monster as good as Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook. And let me tell you something. Michael Carter carried the ball one time. Why is he in the lineup? He doesn't fit there. I think the Jets should either put him on special teams or send him to the practice squad. He doesn't fit on this team. He doesn't work on this team. Another guy that looked really, really good in the game and throughout the game was Tyler Conklin. 4 receptions, 67 yards, 16.8. He didn't have any touchdowns, but that catch in the fourth quarter that drove the defense all the way down to the 40-yard line was fantastic. And then also Garrett Wilson. I don't believe the Jets have used Garrett Wilson and used his strengths in the game. But what I do like about Garrett Wilson is when he needs to make a play and he needs to make a big grab, he does it. 3 receptions, 54 yards, still no touchdowns. Garrett Wilson will break 1,000 yards this year, even with Zach Wilson. He will break 1,000 yards. But what we expected from Garrett Wilson with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, I believe he would have had 1,600 or 1,500 yards and probably around 12 or 13 touchdowns if Aaron Rodgers were throwing him the ball. You look at this team, even with the weapons that they have. And by the way, I just don't understand this roster. They bring in guys, obviously through free agency, and they're not using those guys. And that's a huge problem for the New York Jets.
I don't know where Hardman is. And the one thing about Garrett Wilson that I want to see him do more of, and I don't think they do enough of, is wide receiver screens. I don't get it. He's so good at getting the ball and just running. He's very fast. Just give him those passes and let him go. And I feel like either they don't trust Zach with the short passes yet, or I'm not sure, but I feel like that is something that they really need to add more to their offense. And they did that against Kansas City. They were doing some of those short passes. And this week, I didn't really see many of it. And I feel like that's really where they should be putting that as a staple into their offense.
Mm-hmm. And here's another thing, and we will get into the Giants in just a few moments because there's really nothing good to talk about the Giants. The offense was putrid. The defense was even more putrid. And the offensive line practically killed their quarterback. I mean, seriously, Daniel Jones should not even play for the rest of the season the way this offensive line is really treating it. But nevertheless, the Jets losing Elijah Vera-Tucker for the season absolutely hurts them. It really does, because I believe Elijah Vera-Tucker is the future right tackle to this team and this organization. He's really proven himself over there. Everybody keeps talking about the guard position and filling in that guard position. Even Tippmann. Everybody thinks that Tippmann should be the center of this team. I don't think so. I think Tippmann is a natural guard with his size and his ability, and actually his ability to open up holes in the running game. I think Tippmann should be an everyday guard. And to me, McGovern isn't the guy. But this year you have him. And at the end of this year, after signing him for a year contract, you get rid of McGovern. Maybe you draft another center, something of that magnitude. I think there's a lot of thought where the Jets could go in the offseason. They still have their first-round draft pick. They don't lose it to Green Bay because Aaron Rodgers didn't play 65% of the snaps. So that benefits the Jets. They only lose the second-round draft pick this coming year. And they can actually maybe even trade out of the first round and add a second round and add a late first round. I mean, Joe Douglas has been very interesting when it comes to drafting and moving picks. But, again, going into this game, the Jets are 2-3. That's great. The Jets should really be 3-2. They should have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs last week on Sunday Night Football.
Couldn't have beat New England.
And they definitely should have beaten New England. By the way, Mac Jones was sat in the fourth quarter. He's not even going to probably start next week. I don't even think you'll see Mac Jones ever again on the New England Patriots. I think they're going to go another route. And that says a lot about the New England Patriots. I think they're giving up on the season. Even though you won't hear that from Bill Belichick, but if you heard him at his press conference, when they said, what do you have to do? He says, we have to rebuild. So he's already thinking rebuild, which means this coming year and this coming draft, he could be looking at one of those quarterbacks that could be available, because for the first time in a very long time, the Patriots will be drafting probably in the top 10. They're horrible. So the Jets are in a division right now. You have to contend with Miami. You have to contend with Buffalo. That's the scary part right now. Buffalo is playing good football, but then they lose against the Jacksonville Jaguars overseas. So it didn't make any sense what they did against Miami the week before. And then they go and they lay up a lousy goose egg against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which they're a better team than. So, and then
Jacksonville's a good team, though. They should be competing with the
I
teams
had
like
them
Buffalo.
go to the Super Bowl, but Trevor Lawrence has not looked good this year.
No, he hasn't.
So he has digressed. And Doug Peterson, a guy that everybody thinks was the guy that's going to help this kid step and move forward in his career, has maybe, even though last year we saw a lot of growth in Trevor Lawrence, we've seen 2 steps back from what he was last year. Look at his numbers from last year going into week 5. His numbers were absolutely better by like 250 yards and about 3 or 4 touchdowns. And he didn't have Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley gives him another offset weapon. So I don't understand what the Jacksonville Jaguars have done this year as far as I'm concerned with their lineup. But nevertheless, Trevor Lawrence is going to have to play a big part if they plan to make the playoffs again this year and win their division and go to the Super Bowl. As far as the Jets are concerned, there's a lot of concerns with this team. Their offense has been putrid. Everybody says, well, Zach Wilson looked good against Kansas City. He looked good, but how much better did he look? Okay, he completed passes. He made big throws. He made a great throw again to Conklin in the game. And look, Alan Lazard, he made a couple of good throws to Alan Lazard in this game too, which was impressive. Looking and scoping down the field, that's something we haven't seen Zach Wilson do all season long. So maybe he's figuring things out. Maybe Nathaniel Hackett is giving him some options in the open field. But to me, it's the offense. They need to figure out how to get Dalvin Cook more involved. They have to get, I think, Mecole Hardman involved in the offense with the speed that he has. You could put him in the slot. You could put him on the outside. He could beat a lot of corners. You look at if you watch the Cowboys last night against the San Francisco 49ers, what is their problem right now? They have nobody that can beat. Besides CeeDee Lamb, they have nobody that could beat a defensive, defense secondary on the outside. They have nobody. Nobody can outrun. Michael Gallup has not been the same person since he's tore his ACL. Brandon Cooks he's a good player. He's not a great player anymore. I don't know how explosive could he be this year on the Dallas Cowboys. He hasn't looked explosive so far in the first 5 weeks. So to me, it's all about speed, and the Jets have it. They're just not using it.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, and it really makes me think, is there a problem with Hardman learning the playbook? Because that's the one thing, it's supposed to be a very difficult offense. That's why they brought in some veterans to come in and teach everybody. But why is the guy that you signed, who should be better than Randall Cobb, why is he not getting the starts? Why is he not getting the opportunity? I think Randall Cobb barely even made the team. They only signed him because of Aaron Rodgers. I don't get why Hardman's not playing, why he's not getting chances. I feel like Zach has a great arm, and if Hardman can break away and get open, I think that's a good weapon to have there, and they're not even doing it.
They have to use more schemes in Nathaniel Hackett's offense. They need to use more. And Nathaniel Hackett, what he did with Green Bay and even what he did with Jacksonville is he used a 4-man front, a 4-man wide receiver front, and he spread out the offense. And that was something that threw a lot of defenses off. The Jets have a lot of wide receivers, good wide receivers, quality wide receivers. Alan Lazard is still healthy. Who would have thought in the first 5 weeks Alan Lazard would still be healthy? Garrett Wilson. And then you have Mecole Hardman. You have Conklin. You have weapons. You're using Uzomah a little bit more in the offense. But to me, Uzomah should not be starting over Jeremy Rucker. Jeremy Rucker has played better in the preseason games. I want to see more of the kid because to me, CJ Uzomah will not be there next year. He will not be a part of this team. Conklin will be back next year, and then obviously Jeremy Rucker. So I want to see more of the youngsters that the Jets have, as far as I'm concerned, at the wide receiving and tight end position. As far as the Giants are concerned, my friend, I mean, Daniel Jones pretty much got murdered. I mean, he was sacked 6 times. The week before, he was sacked 11 times. In the last 2 weeks, Daniel Jones has been sacked more than any quarterback in the last 10 years in a 2-game spree. So you look at Daniel Jones, he was 14 for 20, 119 yards. When he could be able to throw the ball. And by the way, he only had 1.9, 2.1 seconds to throw the ball against the Miami Dolphins. By the way, the Miami Dolphins
They don't have a
defense,
good defense.
what happened?
They don't have a good defense.
Not right now. I mean,
No.
I do believe when Jalen Ramsey comes back, he will control one side of the field. So it will open up opportunities where you can blitz the safeties. And that's what they like to do. And that's what their defensive coordinator, as we know, Fangio, what he liked to do throughout his career as a defensive coordinator, especially what we saw over the last couple of years with the Broncos. So I do believe that Fangio is the type of guy that will obviously open up the defense when he gets Jalen Ramsey back. But I don't even think it was that. It's the offensive line woes. And to me, without Thomas and even with Thomas in that lineup, they don't have anybody. That front five is one of the worst. It is the worst front five in football. And they don't give the quarterback more than 1.9, 2.1 seconds to throw the ball. And if you look at the average offensive line in the NFL that gives their quarterback a time to throw the ball, it's 3.5 seconds. So they're about 1.5 to 1.9 seconds off from the average offensive line in football.
This is my thing about the Giants, okay? Now, look back to 2 years ago when Saquon Barkley was coming off the ACL injury. He had a down year, and the Giants really struggled. Then last year, he looked like Saquon Barkley of old, and they had a good year. And now, you look at them now in the last few weeks, and this entire year, he hasn't been the same player again. He's been injured. He's been hurt. It's not – now they're struggling again. Their entire team revolves just around him. And then when it turns to Daniel Jones having to run the offense, he's horrible. This contract, I said it on Josh's show, Game On, that at the end of the season, the New York Giants are going to want to do anything to get rid of this contract. It is a horrible contract that they're paying him, $82 million. He had 15 passing touchdowns. It's a passing league. He should not have gotten that contract. They only did it out of desperation. But put this into perspective for me. Yesterday, the entire game, Daniel Jones had 119 yards passing. Now you have Tyrod Taylor, who came in, played like a half a quarter? He had 86. I don't know what was going on that they did something, but
I don't think it's Daniel Jones. If you look at Daniel Jones,
I think he's really bad quarterback.
He's not. If you don't give the quarterback more than 2 seconds to throw the ball, no quarterback's going to be fantastic. If you look at Dak Prescott over the last couple of weeks, Dak Prescott has had the chance to throw the ball. He's had 5 seconds, and Dak Prescott has one of the fastest releases in the NFL. I think he is the second or third fastest release in the NFL. Daniel Jones has a pretty good release as well. So I don't think it's Daniel Jones. I think it's the weapons. And they had no running game. And all the Giant fans and the Giants organization wanted to give up on Saquon Barkley. They didn't want to pay Saquon Barkley in the offseason. And now you look at the team and you look at the position that the team is in. Without Saquon Barkley, they can't score. They can't put up points. As a matter of fact, if you look at what they did in this game, it was practically this special teams in the defense that really won them the game, gave them 16 points in the game. They didn't win the game, by the way. But no. You know what I mean? But and Matt Breida, you're going to trust that Matt Breida is going to be able to run the ball efficient. He was 9 for 21. That's what he was. 2.3 in average. Average NFL a carry is 3.8, 3.5. So he's not even coming close to that. And Tyrod Taylor, I know you think Tyrod Taylor is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. He's not. If he was, he'd be starting.
I didn't say that.
They don't have any weapons.
I said how
Darren Waller
Jones is. I think he's a terrible quarterback.
Darren Waller
ever impressed me.
Darren Waller was 8 for 86, 10.8. He 10.8 a catch. He had no touchdowns in the game. He was the best player, best offensive option they had, which we knew that was going to happen. Look at their second, third, and fourth options. Darius Slayton, 2 for 35. Could Darius Slayton would
they hyped up Hyatt in the preseason, and he's not even on here.
Well, Hyatt didn't play. I don't think he's healthy right now. And by the way, a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson, who they drafted in the second round 2 years ago. It was obviously Joe Shane's first draft. He really was reaching for Wan'Dale Robinson. The guy can't stay healthy. The guy cannot stay healthy. 5 receptions for 18 yards. I picked him up in my fantasy league thinking that he was going to give me, because a lot of my guys had buys, I thought he was going to give me at least 10 or 11 points. The guy barely gave me 5. He's not a good player. Isaiah Hodgins, I don't want to hear about Isaiah Hodgins, what he did last year. 2 for 19. He's garbage. Every single one of these wide receivers, and except Darren Waller as a tight end, would probably not make any other roster in the NFL. None of them. Darius Slayton, probably be a 4th-tier guy, probably a practice team type of guy. Paris Campbell, give me a break. The guy stinks. That's why he wasn't picked up in the offseason when he was available. Isaiah Hodgins, another guy that had a good season in the second half last year. He was Daniel Jones' number 1 target because he had nobody else to throw to. He looks crappy. And you go down. Sterling Shepard coming back from a torn ACL. And then he is not the same player he was for the money that they gave him. They gave him a 3-year, 4-year deal a couple of years ago, and the guy's been an absolute dud. So there's no excuses to this team. And by the way, I love Dable. I stick up for Dable, but
I think
even
he's
at
a
the
good
press
coach.
conference,
I think he's a very good coach.
Yeah, but here's the thing. He's a good coach. If he was a good coach, he would have pushed the organization to sign Saquon Barkley. Because if you look at their numbers, since Saquon Barkley's been hurt in the last 3 games, they've been putrid. They're not getting enough offense. Darren Waller, even though he's putting up the numbers that you would expect him to, he's not scoring because they can't even get close to the red zone. They have nothing offensively. The Giants look horrible. And again, you're talking about Tyrod Taylor and Daniel Jones. It's like peaches and oranges, okay? There is no comparison to both of them. I really don't believe. And you say 9 for 12, 86 yards. His numbers were almost identical to Daniel Jones, who was 14 for 20. Daniel Jones, everybody knows, he's a mobile quarterback. He likes to move on the run and make the throws on a run. He didn't do that enough in the game because he was running backwards for dear life, because the offensive line, no matter who they put at left tackle or right tackle or even at the guard positions, they stink.
So the New York Giants, now they have all these problems. Now, I think they need a new quarterback. Now, we can agree they need other offensive weapons, a wide receiver, running back, somebody. They need an offensive lineman.
They need 3 offensive linemen.
Yes.
Maybe even 4.
Now, in the draft, it's the top of the – say they get to –
They got to get to –
who do they go for?
The Penn State offensive lineman. I was thinking Marvin Harrison Jr. to give you the weapon that you need. I think you get that from T. Higgins. If he becomes available in free agency, the Giants should heavily unload money to this guy, T. Higgins. Give him that number 1 option. Give Daniel Jones that number 1 option, because you still have him for another year before they can opt out of the rest of the contract. So Daniel Jones is coming back no matter what next year. And everybody keeps saying, well, the Giants, maybe they should go after a quarterback this year. I think they should wait another year if they decide to part ways with Daniel Jones. But you have to give Daniel Jones weapons. Look at the weapons they gave Daniel Jones the last 2 seasons. No quarterback would be able to do that. Even Aaron Rodgers, for all those years with the Green Bay Packers and some of these no-name guys that they bring to the team or they draft in the 4th or 5th round, even those guys are better than the guys that the Giants have in their lineup right now. They're garbage. Garbage. And they also played against a top offensive team with Tua and the Miami Dolphins. 22 for 30, 308 yards, two touchdowns. But he did throw 2 interceptions. And that guy, this kid is so explosive. Everybody keeps talking about Breece Hall and what he looked like last year. And even Walker, when he came in last year for the Seattle Seahawks and what he did in the second half in 8 games, over 1,000 yards and over 10 touchdowns. And he was runner-up for Rookie of the Year. But it wasn't even that. Devon Achane, ever since he's come into come and taken over Raheem Mostert, he has been dominant. 11 carries, 151 yards, 13.7 a carry. 13.7 a carry. 1 touchdown. He's explosive. Back-to-back weeks with over 100 yards. He's been fantastic. And then you have Tyreek Hill, 8 receptions, 181 yards, 1 touchdown. Cedric Wilson, another guy that who is a running back / wide receiver type that they brought from I think they traded with the San Francisco 49ers last year
Mhm.
at the trade deadline. He had 4 receptions, 52 yards. And then Jalen Waddle, who didn't have a great game because he's coming back from an injury, still had 5 receptions, 35 yards, and 1 touchdown. So you look at all these guys, and they have a spread out of offensive players, weapons that they can use at their disposal. I just think that this team was just so much better than the New York Giants. I thought the Giants were going to keep it closer, but again, they were just too much offensively for the New York Giants.
Here's my thing with the Dolphins, though, and that's probably the biggest challenge I think for the Jets in the division if they want to make a run and try and getting a home playoff game for the first time since 1998. It's the Miami Dolphins, but look at 4 of their first 5 games. They haven't played any teams that are quality. Only team they played that is a competitive team that will make the playoffs was the Buffalo Bills, and they beat them. I think once they start playing better teams, you're going to see the real Miami Dolphins on if they are a contender or pretender. And that's why I don't take anything they're doing right now, anything besides just with a grain of salt, because you look at the competition that they're playing with. Yeah, Tua is playing great. Waddle and Hill are playing great. But who are they playing? They're not playing anybody that should challenge them. They haven't played the Cowboys yet. Haven't played the Chiefs yet.
They played Buffalo, and Buffalo whipped their asses.
Exactly. That's why and the Jets beat Buffalo.
Well, that doesn't mean anything. It's all about matchups. It's all about matchups.
I agree, but I think that if the Jets can figure out their offense in this division, I think they have a better chance than people think they do. Right now, they're only 2 games back. It's only 5 games in.
Yeah.
They still play Buffalo. They still play New England once. They still play Miami twice. I don't think Miami is as good. I'm not as sold on them as other people are yet. I want to see them play better teams more.
The Jets haven't played Tua all season last year. He was injured all season.
No.
So even though the Jets, in the first game of the season last year, they played a 3rd-string quarterback. And then at the end of the season, they played the 3rd-string quarterback, and they lost in a very close game against the Miami Dolphins. They have Zach Wilson again. Zach Wilson was practically their season quarterback.
Lyle?
Besides Mike White, he was their number 1 quarterback last year. And now Zach Wilson's I'm sorry?
Oh, you cut out.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Zach Wilson was their starting quarterback last year before Mike White took over. And even with Mike White and Zach Wilson, they only beat Miami 1 time. And at the end of the season, they should have won that game. And obviously they choked at the end of the game in the 4th quarter. This is a different Miami Dolphins team. It's a different team. I think McDaniels, to me, is one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. He's fantastic. And I like what I see with the Dolphins. They flow with their offense. Their defense is not as strong as we thought it was going to be with Jalen Ramsey. But when Jalen Ramsey comes back, this defense could be as good a defense as any defense in this division. It's crazy to say that, but it's true. Fangio can't do what he likes to do using his blitz packages because he's got to keep the safeties back.
They have no quarterbacks. They have no DBs. Everyone's injured.
Yep. So that's why he can't use the safeties in the blitz packages that he used when he was in Denver. So I think it's a different scheme for these Dolphin defensive players to learn. And he came at the end of the season last year. He had the whole off season to get his defense moving in the right direction. You bring in Jalen Ramsey. He hasn't been in his defense yet. So I think it's a different game when, in the second half, when these guys figure out that defense, the Fangio defense. But again, going back to the Giants, if I was the team GM or I was running this organization right now, I'm not going to say to lose every single game, but right now there's no use of winning games because there's no way you're going to catch up to the Cowboys. There's no way you're going to catch up to Philadelphia. Even Washington's a better team than you are. So right now in the position that you are, you need to fall in a good position to get that offensive lineman. There's only one offensive lineman that really stands out in this draft, and that's the Penn State offensive tackle, who is a beast. If you put him on the other side of Thomas, you practically built your right tackle and left tackle for the next 10, 15 years. You signed Andrew Thomas in the offseason, gave him a lot of money. Now you bring in this kid, you have him for 5 years before you have to pay him, and then you build. You have Schmidt as your center, who looked really good before he got hurt, and then you just figure out the interior. You can find interior guards in the later rounds, in the third rounds, in the fourth round. You can find really talented guards that you can
Do you
move
think
into
Evan
this
Neal can
offensive
figure it
line.
out?
I'm sorry?
Do you think Neal could figure it out? He was coming into the draft. He was the best tackle in that draft. He was up there, and he fell backwards, but he hasn't looked good at all this year. He's been brutal.
I think Neal should be moved to the guard position. Maybe you move Neal in the offseason to the right or left guard position. I think it's less stress on him. You draft the Penn State kid. You put him at the right tackle position because Andrew Thomas is an all-world tackle, a top 3, top 4 tackle in the league. You put him over there. It solidifies your offensive line. That's something that you need to do, including the Jets. They need to do something in the off season with that offensive line. They need to add some veterans or maybe even draft a couple of tackles in the draft and maybe you get lucky. But the Giants definitely need to look in that way instead of looking at the wide receiver way in the draft. I think in free agency, I think the Giants should go after T. Higgins. There's a couple of good wide receivers that'll be available this offseason, and the Giants have to put them. That should be number one option to spend the money that they're going to have available. And now they're not paying Saquon. Saquon's not coming back next year. So they have all the money in the world next year to add either 1 or 2 wide receivers to really solidify this offense.
So what do you think the benefit of T. Higgins would be to go to the Giants when they're probably 3 to 5 years away from being a perennial
They're really
contender?
not. I know everybody thinks that the Giants are 3 to 5 years.
I think they are because of how good Dallas and the Eagles are right now.
Hold on one second. The Giants' schedule was easy last year, and they knocked off the Minnesota Vikings in the first round of the playoffs in the wild card game. And then they bumped into they hit a speed bump of the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that went all the way to the Super Bowl. The Giants are not far off. Being that the conference is so bad, who's good? San Francisco, the Eagles, the Cowboys, maybe Seattle, and then you could flip-flop in the other division, Tampa Bay, Atlanta. You can't bet on them. And then Green Bay, Minnesota. Minnesota might not have Kirk Cousins next year. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions in the NFC conference. The Giants, if they could figure out this offensive line, and that's what Evan Neal should be moved to the guard. You try to fall in the top 5. If you can, maybe in the top 3, you draft the kid from Penn State, like I was saying, and you solidify that offensive line for years to come. Then you build on the outside. The defense could still do what they believe they can do. Wink Martindale, with very little, he can use blitz packages. He can get at the quarterback. I think Thibodeau is a bust. I never thought he was going to be a good player in the league. He comes from Oregon. I'm not a big Oregon fan as far as.
He reminds me of Javon Clowney.
I'm sorry?
He reminds me of Clowney. He reminds me of a guy who can play when he wants to, but is very inconsistent and looks lazy.
Jadeveon Clowney you're talking about?
Yeah.
I don't think he's anywhere close to Jadeveon Clowney. As a matter of fact, I think Jadeveon Clowney's a better player.
Well, I'm talking about how his consistency. Because Jadeveon Clowney was
inconsistent because he really never pushed himself. If he pushed himself as an NFL player, Jadeveon Clowney could have been one of the best linebackers / defensive ends in the league. The problem is, coming, from South Carolina, everybody said, "Oh, this guy's the next Lawrence Taylor." He had a lot of pressure on him, just as much as I look at Micah Parsons. Everybody's comparing him to different players and some of the greatest of all time. But again, his numbers look like that they're moving that way. But you don't know. An injury could end his career. He might not be as explosive. Remember, he's all speed, so you don't know what these guys are going to be. Maybe when you add better defensive players to that line, maybe it makes him a better player. But I just don't see it. I never thought Thibodeau was going to be as good as everybody said he was going to be.
I don't know. To me, just watching, he looks like he's lazy and does what he wants to when he feels like it.
And that's a lot of players. That's a lot of players in the NFL. Once they get their money and they get their endorsements, and he got a lot of endorsements. Yeah. He had his endorsements in his. He had a lot of endorsements with headphones and all that other stuff. The Dre, he's one of the spokesmen for Dre headphones. He got a lot of money before he made the money that he got as a rookie. So he still has a lot to prove, and I think the Giants are in a position where they have to figure out what their identity is. And I don't want to blame Daniel Jones for that. It's not Daniel Jones's fault that this team isn't winning. The offensive line is putrid, and if they can give him some kind of weapon in the offseason, not just Darren Waller. By the way, he will not be signed. He will opt out of his contract in the offseason, especially the way he's going. I think he has like 300 yards. If he breaks close to 1,000 yards, somebody else will give him the money. He will not stay with the New York Giants. He's going to opt out of that $12 million contract. He'll go elsewhere. He'll go to a contender because the Giants are, I wouldn't say 3 years away. I think they're probably a year away. If they get it right in the offseason with the money that they have, bring in the wide receiving free agents that they need, and then go in the draft and definitely fix that offensive line, I think they're a year away. Not this year, not next year, but the year after. I think they're a year away in an NFC conference that's just putrid.
The thing is, I think they also need a big playmaker on defense, which I don't think they have right now. They don't have a guy out there that is like.
That's why I'm saying they need T. Higgins. T. Higgins is a playmaker.
On defense.
Oh, defense? I think
they have I think they have pieces that can make it a capable defense, but they don't have a guy out there that can change the game.
There are not many guys out there that can do that. I mean, you probably can name two handfuls that can change a game. You want to go after Aaron Donald in the offseason if he's available, then go after him. Are you going to pay him? That's the question. Look what Buffalo had to do 2 years ago to get Von Miller. I mean, they gave him a lot of money. And this is a guy that was 33, 34 years old at the tail end of his career. Guy can't stay on the field. He can't stay healthy. But they gave it to him because he's a playmaker. He's a game changer. There are not many game changers like that. They had a chance to get Micah Parsons. They decided to pass up on him. So that's their fault. And then they traded with the Chicago Bears. They lose the human joystick. They trade him away at the trade deadline last year to Kansas City, and he helps Kansas City win the Super Bowl last year. This has been the Giants' forte over the last couple of years. They don't do the right thing. And this organization, they bring in Joe Shane. Everybody thinks he's the savior, but let's see what he's done in the draft. Schmidt looks like a player. We know Evan Neal doesn't look much like a player. We know Thibodeau hasn't really proved himself yet. If you look at his drafts in the last 2 years, they haven't stuck out at all. And to me, they've had enough rookies that they drafted over the last 2 years that could have made this team or could have been big impact players for this team. And Wan'Dale Robinson is not something that sells me for the future.
If the Giants don't have Thibodeau and Neal turn it around, or at least one of them, having 2 top 10 picks and getting nobody that can be a franchise player or be there for a long time on your team, that's really bad. That's a huge miss. And the Jets are in a lucky position where they might have gotten 2 guys who can be there for a long time on this team that are franchise players.
Then there's the New York Islanders. And I want to get into some hockey because we have a little bit left of the show. And the Islanders going into the offseason, there was a lot of questions going after offensive talent. Lou Lamoriello has struck out year in and year out for the last 3 seasons. And going into the offseason, there were a lot of names that were brought into the Islanders conversation, and they struck out again in the offseason. And then re-signing Pierre Engvall for a 7-year contract, it made no sense. Scott Mayfield, who's a good defensive player, giving him a 7-year extension makes no sense. They have all these
manipulation.
It's not even manipulation. I understand what the Islanders are trying to do. I understand what Lou's trying to do. What he did with the Devils, build around the defense and the goaltending. They have Sorokin. They finally gave Sorokin that big-time extension, the 8-year contract.
I was scared it wouldn't happen, to be honest.
I didn't. I wasn't. The Islanders have done everything to make him happy, including bring back Varlamov. Varlamov and him are very close. That was one of the reasons why they brought – and Varlamov wanted to come back. They gave him a cheaper contract, but – you gave Varlamov, a 3-year extension, a 4-year extension? That made no sense. Varlamov is 35 years old? You're giving a 35-year-old a goaltender a 4-year extension. I understand you're trying to make Sorokin happy, but you don't need Varlamov. You don't need to pay Varlamov that kind of money in a 4-year deal. I would have given him a 2-year extension with a third year for a team option. I don't understand that. And then you trade Josh Bailey. You trade him to Chicago. You get future consideration. What kind of future consideration are you going to get?
It was a cap dump.
Well,
That's all it was. All it was a cap dump to get rid of his contract because they had to sign. They were trying to sign Engvall and Mayfield. That's all that was get rid of them and someone. They might not even ever get anything. They might get some low draft pick.
They gave Josh Bailey away, and they also gave up a second-round draft pick in 2026. A second-round draft pick. That's a high draft pick.
That's a lot of teams do that now with contracts that are dead. They give something and the player,
but
they get nothing back in order for the team to take the player.
Lyle, as an Islander fan, would you be happy with that? You're giving up another draft pick, okay? That's what you're giving up, a second-round draft pick. And what did you get for it? You gave up Josh Bailey.
Cap space.
Cap space, which you threw into Pierre Engvall and Scott Mayfield.
Pierre Engvall on the second line with Nelson and Palmieri last season. That was a great second line, and they produced very well last year. That was once those three were together from that point on, that was their best line, period. And they're going to be together again, and they're probably going to be their best line again.
I'm an Islander guy, okay? And I understand you want to blow their heads up. I do not believe Pierre Engvall is worth 7 years, okay? He's a speed guy for his size, but the guy doesn't put the puck in it. The most goals he scored in his career in a season, I think, was like 23, 24. That's not going to get it done. You need a goal scorer. They had a chance to go after 3 goal scorers again in the offseason, and they strike out. And that has a lot to do with
space. They couldn't.
No, they had cap space. They could have made a move.
No, they didn't.
They could have made a move, man. It was embarrassing. It really was.
Year, the cap is going to be it's projected to go up to 88.5 to 89 million. Most of that is already taken up by Sorokin's extension. Now, that is why they had to trade Bailey. That is why they have Mayfield and Engvall at a lower value. Because they wanted to bring them back, and if they gave them a fair deal for the years, their AAV would have been higher, and they wouldn't have been able to keep Sorokin. The point of what they're trying to do is, in 4 years, what the cap will be at, though that 3.5 cap space that Engvall and Mayfield are at, is going to be very minimal, when the cap keeps going up. It's having a big jump this year, it might have another big jump afterwards. It's not going to be a big impact. It's going to be a lower cost. It's not going to be that big of a deal. And in the last couple of years of the contract, it'll be easy to trade. Varlamov isn't going to be here for 4 years. The last maybe year of that contract, they're going to dump him somewhere. Someone will take him, and they'll give up another, maybe a third, maybe a 4th round pick for them to take him for 1 year. They might do that the same way to Mayfield towards the end of his contract. Engvall, if he produces the same way that he did with Nelson and Palmieri, he could score. He could have maybe 55 to 60 points this year. That line was very good. But the biggest question mark for this team is Horvat. After he came over from Vancouver, he was producing very well until Barzal got injured.
But that's what happens. Who do you put him with? Who did you put him with after he got hurt?
He's going to be with Barzal again, and the current projection is for him to be with those two to be with Holmstrom.
That's not enough offense. As far as I'm concerned, you look at the Rangers, all they needed was a coach. They go after Peter Laviolette. They get the coach, which, by the way, he should have stayed with the Islanders. If it wasn't for Mike Milbury, maybe Peter Laviolette is still the Islanders coach, 10 years, 12 years.
Well, I find it funny because Michael Pekka got him fired from the Islanders, and now they're coaching together on the Rangers.
Mike Milbury is yes. I wouldn't want to work for Mike Milbury. He screwed up that whole organization. But, again, the Islanders had money to spend in the offseason, and they struck out. They go after these.
They didn't have any space. They had too many other places to fill. They had to still sign Wallstrom. They had to add another defenseman. So if they signed,
do you remember Alex DeBrincat? They had a chance to go after Alex DeBrincat. They were one of the runners up. They were one of the runners up to get him. He wanted to go home. He wanted to go to Detroit.
They couldn't give him the money he wanted.
They couldn't give him the money that they wanted.
He had no cap space.
They could. They were.
No, they couldn't.
They were absolutely.
They had like $7 million cap space. That's like $7 million.
Lyle, he was getting traded. They were going to move pieces. If they got to bring they would have traded other pieces.
He was an RFA. He had to be extended. They were
Lyle,
trading his RFA rights.
Lyle.
And
The
I'm
two
telling
teams,
you,
the two teams that were absolutely going for him were the Islanders
and
and
Detroit.
Detroit. And Detroit got him because he didn't want to play for the Islanders. And by the way, Detroit offered more than the Islanders could offer him.
Because the Islanders couldn't offer any more than $7 million. And they still had other players they had to re-sign.
The Islanders could have traded pieces that would have given him more on the payroll, where they could have added Alex DeBrincat and given him an extension. They weren't willing to trade big names. They were not
who
willing
would you have moved if you had to do that?
They could have traded one of their top defensive players.
Who would you have traded?
Pulak is one of those guys.
Traded Ryan Pulak, who you just gave a giant contract to.
Absolutely, giant contract. It was a great contract, a fair contract. You're giving a first line defensive player. What is he making? $7 million a year, $6 million a year to Ryan Pulak. That's a great move. That's
a fantastic contract.
I'm sorry.
That's a fantastic contract.
No, it is. So I would have traded him. I would have put him in the trade.
I would never. I'm not trading him or Pelech at all.
And JP Pajot. I would have traded Pajot and him for him. Yeah, Alex DeBrincat would change the Islanders' offense.
See, the thing is, Pajot, he has a modified no trade clause, which he 12 teams that he can go to. Now, one of the things is, he probably would have went back to Ottawa, but would Ottawa have wanted him? That's the question, because they would have had to take that entire $5.5 million contract. It's a two-way street. It's so easy to say, "Hey, we'll trade this, we'll trade that," but if the other people aren't willing to take back that, especially when you have no farm system, because you haven't had a first-round pick in almost 5 years. The last guy
fault is that?
Was Noah Dobson.
Whose fault is that?
That's Lou Lamoriello's.
Okay,
but you know what? Because they had of the pandemic, they were forced. The only way in order to get guys was to make trades at the deadline. And the only asset they had was their draft picks. Because the pandemic completely screwed up their plans to re-sign Taves, completely screwed up their plans to get other offensive players to support Barzell. They finally did that. Now, people are sitting here saying, hey, they're all worried about the team, but if you look at what they did compared to the opening day last year, and you look at that opening day roster, they had two problems on that lineup: Beauvillier and Bailey. They're both gone, and now they're switched with Engvall, who produced very well with Nelson and Palmieri, and Bo Horvat.
And you brought up Beauvillier. Look at what Beauvillier did over there in Vancouver in the second half.
Sometimes you need to have that change of scenery. I'm very happy for him. I love Beauvillier, but it was 2 years in a row where he wasn't producing. He had to get moved. He had $4.5 million contract. He got a change of scenery, and he did well.
You're going to tell me right now, when you look at this roster offensively, and I'm going to name the players, and you're going to tell me from centers to wingers that you're excited about this season. Matthew Barzal, Casey Zizekas, Bo Horvat, Brock Nelson, JP Pajot, Kyle Palmieri. Those are your guys. Then you have your wingers, Clutterbuck again.
Palmieri's a winger.
A winner?
Winger.
No, but he's put down as a center too. He's on the center and a winger.
I don't know where you're looking, but I don't think he's ever played center.
Whatever. Fasching. You have Fasching. You have Holmstrom, who I think will have a better season this year. The young kid that they have: Johnston, Lee, Martin, and Wallstrom. Okay. Then you have your defense, which your defense is loaded. You have a good defense. You have a bunch of good young players.
Problem is, Noah Dobson, he was really bad in his own end last year, and he has to take that step and become more solidified defensively.
That has a lot to do with the coaching. The coaching stinks. Lambert is not the guy. I'm sorry. Lou was wrong about that. He struck out on the coach.
Well,
he should have went after, and I'll say this again, the Islanders had a chance to go after the same guy the Rangers went after, and the Rangers won. They had a chance to go after him. But
you can't say they won when the Islanders didn't go after him.
No, the Islanders didn't go after him because they're a stupid organization. Okay?
At the end of the day, Lambert is the head coach because Trotz picked him. Trotz called Lamoriello and told him to hire Lambert. That's exactly what happened. When he got fired, he immediately called Lamoriello and told him to hire Lambert.
Oh,
and
he was wrong. Barry Trotz was wrong.
Well, every year after Barry Trotz got hired, which he never should have been fired. But I don't think he was actually fired for on the ice issues. I think this is more of a personal life issue, that it was more of doing him a favor that they fired him so that he could still get paid and still have a job for that time. But in my opinion, I think that Lane Lambert was in a position. He took them to the play. I don't think he's the guy either. I don't. But
they should have beaten the Carolina. They were a better team in that series against Carolina.
I agree 100%.
And in the first two games, definitely the refs cost the Islanders those two games. No question they did. But that's not an excuse. That's always, as an Islander fan, you're always trying to find a way to make an excuse, just like the Boston Bruin fans. They always try to find a way to make the excuses when they get knocked out early in the playoffs. They're a talented team, and they fall. They make all the trades that they did at the trade deadline, the Boston Bruins, and then all of a sudden in the first round, they get swept by the Florida Panthers. So
I think if you look at Lee Lambert, they were in a position that they couldn't fire him because he made the playoffs. They were coming off of a year where they didn't make the playoffs. I think if Trotz took them to the playoffs the year prior, and then they hired Lambert, and he did the same thing he did this year, then they could have done that. Because you really can't get a progression from the year before and fire your contract, your coach. That puts you in a bad position for any guy you're trying to hire. That sets up now. If we have the same thing, if we get a wild card again, if the Islanders don't get one, 2, or 3, they get wild card and play Carolina or a team like that, or the Devils again, and they get knocked out in the first round, then you can fire him for that.
The Islanders might not even make the playoffs this year.
I think they will. I think they will.
That conference is good. I'm an Islander guy. I don't know, man.
I think getting a full year.
I am worried about this team offensively. I don't know how you're not worried about it. Are you watching the preseason right now? They're not scoring enough. I understand they're not scoring enough. What's going to happen in the regular season? Are you going to trust Brock Nelson is going to have the year that he had last year? Come on,
2 years in a row. I will trust him.
That's fine. I still don't trust it. He's getting older. Barzell needs to break out this year. This is the year that Barzell needs to wake up. Yeah. He needs to wake up. He's talented. He needs to wake up. And stop blaming Bo Horvat. It wasn't.
I never blamed Bo Horvat.
But you're making it seem that when Bo Horvat came in and he lost Barzell, oh my God, he should have produced. He should have still put up numbers.
Didn't say that. I said he didn't produce as much.
Well, how do you expect him to when you lose your best offensive player on the line?
He scored 2 goals.
You have Anders Lee? Come on, man.
He scored like 2 goals after that.
Guy stinks. Anders Lee is one of the most highest paid captains in the NHL. And $7 million, $8 million a year he's making. He's not worth the money. He's not fast. He's slow as hell. And to me, all he does is stand in front of the net and screen the goaltender. That's all he does. He's not good at anything else. He's not good at the penalty kill. Produces what?
He scored over 30 goals again this year.
But that doesn't mean anything. When you're scoring goals at the end of the season, when it means nothing. How many goals did he score in the playoffs? How many goals did he score in the playoffs?
I don't have that information.
He scored 1. He scored 1 goal in the playoffs. That's not good enough. That's not.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of guys weren't good enough in the playoffs last year.
You can't sell me that Anders Lee is good because he's not. He stinks. Okay.
I think he was fine. He was fine last year.
There are 3 guys.
He had years where he scored 25 to 30 again this year. I'm not going to complain about that. I think he's overpaid 100%. But I'm not going to complain about a guy putting in 25 to 30 goals when we're a team that needs to score.
I'm going to tell you, I want to get to the Rangers. I'm going to give you probably around 6 guys I would keep, and the rest of the guys the Islanders need to get rid of. You ready to hear this? I keep Matthew Barzell, Bo Horvat. All right, you want Brock Nelson? We'll keep Brock Nelson. All right, there you go. That's the offense. I keep Noah Dobson. I keep Pelech. I keep Pulak, and I keep Sorokin. That's it.
7. You said 6.
That's it. Whatever.
That's 7. You said 6.
Whatever. 6, 7, because that's a goaltender. I didn't mention the goaltender. I said those are the 6 players I'd keep, and obviously Sorokin. The rest of the team, get rid of them. They stink. I
think Romanov was very good last year.
Oh my God, he was horrible.
No,
he didn't start playing. He only started playing like the last 2 weeks of the season. He was horrible throughout the season.
He had
power play goals that he gave up when he was playing defense. He was horrible, man. I thought the Islanders gave up a lot for Romanov. They gave up a lot for him.
They gave up a 13th overall pick, but you look at what that was. Like, that's not a guarantee. You know what you're getting with a guy who was looked at to have a lot of potential in Montreal and was already playing in the NHL. Versus a guy who, in the draft, you could draft these guys that could never play a game. That happens all the time.
All right, so I want to get into the Rangers, and if you're a Ranger fan, you should be very excited. Everybody's going to say, well, are you a Ranger fan or are you an Islander fan? I'm actually an Islander fan, but the Rangers did something that they absolutely needed in the offseason. That was finding a coach. And to add Peter Laviolette, who is probably, I would say, top 10 all time when it comes to coaching in NHL history. Yes, you heard it from me. Top 10, won a Stanley Cup, has been to multiple Stanley Cups. This is the guy that I really wanted for the New York Islanders. The Islanders gave up on him for what, in 1.5 years, 2 years, because of Mike Milbury and whatever, Michael Pecco, whatever his name is. I don't care. I don't. You want to blame somebody, blame somebody. But this roster, it's only going to benefit adding somebody like a Peter Laviolette, because you look at the team, they're loaded. The Rangers are loaded. I don't trust Panarin, but Panarin is consistent. He's going to give you about 30 goals. He's going to give you about 100 points. Chris Kreider, he wasn't as good as the year before, but in the playoffs and on the power play and even shorthanded, this guy could score, and he's a great penalty killer. I don't like Capo Caco. I think they, give him the extension the year before. He did play better this year, but how much better? This guy was a top draft pick. He was the second pick in the first round. In what was it, 3 years ago? This guy has been a bust. He's been a bust. Mika Zibanejad is, I believe, the Rangers' best player. Adam Fox, who has the co-captaincy now, I love him. He's a Wantor, Long Islander guy. Fantastic kid, fantastic family. Met his family. I've known his family for a while. Very, very nice kid. Jacob Trouba stinks, but nevertheless, he's giving you have the depth. You added a guy like Blake Wheeler, a guy that has, experience in the playoffs. Jonathan Quick as your backup goaltender. I almost said quarterback, but backup goaltender. I mean, Vincent Trocheck, he was fantastic at winning faceoffs last year, and he could play better this year on a roster this good. And Barclay Goodrow and Igor Shesterkin and even Keandre Miller. This is a good roster. This is from top to bottom. This is a fantastic roster, and all they needed was a coach to kind of lead them that way. And Peter Laviolette, he's going to teach the younger players how to play defense, how to play team defense. And this guy, he thinks defense first and then offense. That's something that Barry Trotz has taught for many, many years from Washington, and then obviously with the Predators. Now he's running the Predators, or whatever. He's the assistant vice president or player personnel, whatever he is, or GM, vice president, GM or whatever the hell it was. But nevertheless, I mean, the Rangers are stacked. They're expected to be a very good team this year, and probably as good as any team in this conference. You look at Boston. Boston lost a lot of players in the offseason. They did. And I think with the Rangers, they bring back practically the whole roster. They didn't really lose anything. And
they didn't really add anything much either.
They didn't have to. They needed a coach. They needed a guy that was going to be another face in that locker room, give another voice in that locker room, because obviously the voice in that locker room wasn't benefiting the organization and the team. This team was a good
bottom six depth, and right now I'm looking at Forever Blue Shirts and their predictions for the season, and they have Hedl as a second line center.
Fantastic player, by the way.
I think Hedl is great, but he had, I think it was like around 5 points last year. If he's getting that projection to be a second line center, that has to improve. He has to be the Hedl of last year plus, getting those more opportunities. Because Trocheck, he has been on the decline the last few years, and
he looked good last year.
He still had a good year, but he's still going down to what he was.
You're not expecting him to score goals. You're expecting him to be a penalty killer. You're expecting him
not going to
win face-offs. He can do all that.
I don't think Trocheck is going to be able a guy this year to rely on as a second line center, and Hedl needs to be that. Because after Zibanejad, they have Hedl and Trocheck and then Bonino. Now, if Hedl can step up and be that number 2 center they need, I think them and the Islanders have the 2 best center depths in the Metro. But that's too much of an X factor.
I don't like the Rangers center depth. I like.
Well, I'm saying if Hedl lives up, has that year that he should have.
I think
being that
that's the
second line center.
Islanders' strength is their center depth.
It is,
The
yes.
problem is their winger depth.
I'm
The
saying
Rangers have good wingers.
if Hedel takes that step to be that second line center and has more points, takes the next step up, because he had like around 45 points last year, he has to have another step up and get to 60 plus to be that number 2 center. If he doesn't do that, then that's where their center depth is really worrying me, because I don't think Trocheck is going to be a guy you can really rely on for 82 plus playoffs to be in that role. He's getting another year older. They're a team that is older than last year.
They're one of the youngest. The Islanders, I mean, the Rangers are one of the youngest teams in the NHL. I think they were 4th or 5th when it comes to age from last year. This year, what are they? A year older? They're still one of the younger teams in the NHL. They have a good farm system. They do. And here's the thing. The only thing that, if you're a Ranger fan, what you need to worry about is their defense. Because besides Adam Fox and maybe even Trouba, Keandre Miller was on and off. But I like what Keandre Miller did in certain aspects of his game last year. He was definitely better. Ryan Lindgren, he was great when he plays. When they match him up with Adam Fox, they play great together. When they move him to another defensive pairing, he's horrible. And I like Brandon Schneider too. But by the way, I think he's a great player too. I think they need to move Schneider and Fox together, and that should be their number 1 pairing. I think they're 2 really good young guys, and I don't care if they're lefty, righty. It doesn't really matter to me. I think both of them could play, no matter if they're righty or lefty. I think they could play together. So, and here's the thing: the problem with the Rangers, their defensemen are all practically righties. I think. Let me see: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 out of their 11 defensemen are
so
righties.
here's the thing with the Rangers: they have Zibanejad, Vesey, Goudreau, Trocheck, Gustafsson, Kreider, Panarin, Bonino, and Wheeler, all over 30. That's most of their top 9.
That's still young.
Once you get to 30, that's considered on the older age in sports nowadays. 30 and plus, that's when it starts to go down. And that's the problem with the Islanders. They're all over 30. That's the thing. They're another year older, and that's why I don't want to rely on Trocheck. Because now you would have to have 2 guys that are in their 30s to be in your number 1, number 2. That's why I want.
All right. This is 2021 and 2022. It's a year later. The New Jersey Devils were number 1 in the league as the youngest team in the NHL, 25.2. The Columbus Blue Jackets, 25.3. The New York Rangers, 25.5.
That was 2 years ago.
No, that was last year.
21, 22 was 3 years
22.
ago.
It was. It doesn't matter. They're
24.
This popped up over here. It doesn't matter. They're still one of the top 5 youngest teams in the NHL. And the Islanders,
I'm trying to find
one of the oldest.
That's that.
They were the oldest last year.
They were one of the oldest last
year. They were the oldest last year.
I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying that the Rangers got another year older, and that's why they have to rely on the young guys like Hedel to take that next step up. You can't rely on your top 6 to all be guys who are 30 and higher, because that's the problem that the Islanders have.
Well, I'm trying to find the age, the average age, 2020.
I'm trying to find that too.
Here it is. All right. This is for 4/19/2023. The Devils, right now Vancouver's the youngest. Then there's Buffalo, Columbus, Jersey Devils, Arizona, the Coyotes, the Red Wings, the Senators, the Kings, the Flyers, the Canadians, the Ducks, the Predators, the Blackhawks, then the Rangers. The Rangers are 3, 6,
they're right in the middle.
9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14th in the league. 27.6. 27. They're still a young roster. And guess what? Where are the Islanders?
They're 4th from the top.
No.
Fifth.
No, they're 28.5. They actually got younger.
30.95.
They actually got younger this year.
Rangers Islanders is 30.0 exactly.
This is the average age of NHL rosters from 4/19/2023.
I'm looking at Left Wing Lock right now with the updated rosters from.
All right. Well, this is what I see right here from 4/19/2023. The Islanders are right behind the Toronto Maple Leafs, which they are 28.5. So The Islanders actually got younger this year. That's not
They
that's
did
not saying
because
much.
they got rid of Parise, who was like 40.
Well, finally they get rid of him, but
Well,
never.
he scored 20, and he was one of their better players in their bottom six last year. I take him back over Goussier playing left wing with
I
on
want to
that
see
line.
some of the young studs that they have in their farm system in the
Who, the
AHL.
Islanders?
Yeah, the Islanders have two
They have
really good
no young
young.
studs in their farm system.
They do actually. They have the kid
None
from.
of them that are close to NHL already. They have nobody that you can plant right in there right now. There's maybe one player.
Hmm?
There's one player.
Oh,
He's Russian. I can't fucking pronounce his name. It's Ishikov. I don't want to pronounce his name wrong.
I'm just trying to find the Islanders youngsters and the official guide over here of junior players that they have right now. I know they have a couple of really good young players in on the AHL team. So the Islanders AHL roster 2023.
Ruslan Ishikov. He's probably their biggest talent down there right now. Last year he had now it just refreshed. 17 goals, 34 assists, 51 points. He's Russian. He went to the NCAA in University of Connecticut. He's probably their most NHL ready. He's 23 years old. The next would probably be Dufour, but he has probably another year down there left till he's NHL
I think
ready.
Dufour should have made the team this year.
No,
I
he
do.
didn't have a great. He had a good camp, but
He looked great. He got faster.
He did, but he
He's got good hands.
He needs another year down
Yeah, well,
there.
you know what's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen. Lou Lamoriello is going to trade him, like everybody else. Trades away their top prospects, their top good youngsters, and trade them for nothing. Look, they did it to Ronti. They everybody was talking about Antti how good he looked and everything like that in the AHL, even when he got called up in the NHL. And what did they trade him for? I understand they traded him for Bo Horvat, but Anthony Beauvillier had as good of a season in the second half as Bo Horvat. And maybe because of Barzell being injured, that's fine. But Beauvillier is playing on a younger team. And, going from the Islanders to Vancouver, a lot of people thought that it was going to take a while for Beauvillier to figure it out. He figured out pretty quick how to be the player that he was in the playoffs back to really for the last 4 years. I mean, he was the Islanders' best. He was the Islanders' best offensive player in the playoffs, really.
He was 100%. But that's the thing with Beauvillier. He was a hot, cold player. When he was hot, he was on fire. But when he was cold, he did nothing. And he was like that for 2 years in a row, where he just did nothing. And you know what? He needed a change of scenery. Hopefully, he finds it in Vancouver, and he is more consistent going into this year. But it wasn't going to happen here. Unfortunately, they had to move someone. They needed the cap space. It was time to move him, and I think it was the right move. And now, if you compare their two rosters going into last year and going to this year, the Islanders are much improved than last year's opening night roster.
I don't know what you see because
I see.
To me, it's the same roster.
Their top two lines are better. I see the second line. The second line, I told you earlier, produced very well after they put Engvall on that second line.
This is the same offensive roster they had last year, and they couldn't put pucks in the net, and they're going to have problems this year doing the same thing. Even if Barzell has a massive year with 40 goals and Bo Horvat has 40 goals, that's not enough.
They have two key players who were not on the team to start the year last year. Having a full 82 with Engvall and Bo Horvat in the lineup is going to make them a better team. I'm not saying they're going to be a team that can go compete for the Stanley Cup, but I think they will make the playoffs. They'll score more than they did last year. I think they could have a chance to finish third or be in contention to finish third in the division. But I don't think that they will make a run in the playoffs like they did. I think there's too many good teams like the Devils. You have Tampa's going to be good again. Toronto, Florida. There's too many good teams for them to do that again.
The Rangers.
Oh, yes, them too. I don't think
Buffalo. They're going to be good this year too.
I don't have the Rangers in the same.
By the way, guess who? I'm just going to let everybody know. Patrick Kane's more than likely going to Buffalo. I've been hearing a lot of stories that he's going to go home. So
I don't think that the Rangers are in the same conversation as the Devils or Florida.
Oh, I do.
Or Toronto right now.
Toronto stinks. They were lucky
Toronto
with the
is going to
goaltending last
first
year.
in that division. Toronto's going to win that division again. They can
I
score.
disagree.
We'll see.
I
But
think I still think the Bruins are a pretty good team. They're a pretty good roster.
they lost their top two centers and they didn't replace
And that's
them.
right. And fine. And the Florida Panthers in another year for another full year of that roster and what they did last year, I think they're going to be pretty damn good too. So
Florida's going to be very good. Florida or Toronto's going to win that division.
and Ottawa's roster is loaded. They have a bunch
They
of
have a
good young
chance to win the
players.
playoffs. Them in the Buffalo, they could get in. That division, the Atlantic, is going to be very tough.
How about Carolina? I
Carolina's.
I know they're in the Metro, but it nevertheless, I mean, Detroit's going to be better this year. They added DeBrincat. I mean, there are a lot of good teams. And what are the Islanders? We look at all these rosters. Look at all these rosters.
I still don't think Detroit is
Carolina added
a playoff team.
What happened?
I still don't think Detroit's a playoff team.
I think they're good. They're young and they're fast.
They'll be a team that you have to play hard against, but they're going to be a team that is not good enough to make the playoffs.
I think they're going
to take another step up, but they won't. I don't think they will.
I think Stevie Yzerman knows what he's doing. I think.
Oh, he does. He did it in Tampa too. He's done a great job so far.
That's the team that I think is going to take steps back. I think they're getting older.
Tampa?
And Tampa's getting older. And I think I love their coach. I love what they're doing over there. They have some sensational players, but a lot, like I said, their roster is, they have 2 or 3 really good young players, and the rest of their roster is veterans. And I think they're going to start to break down like we are watching the Penguins do. I mean, the Penguins added a weapon in the offseason too. Look, the Penguins got better this offseason
But
too.
here's the thing with the Penguins. Their biggest issue was in their own end. And their strategy was to try and do what Carolina has done, which take defensemen that are very good at puck moving, but not great in their own end, and try and use their puck moving ability to keep the possession with the puck. And
They added the best defenseman in the league last year.
He's not. He's the best offensive defenseman.
It doesn't matter. You added another offensive player at that position.
In his own end,
the power play.
One of the worst defensemen in the league.
It's fine.
And that's a problem.
But they have other guys that can play defense over there.
No, they are very bad in their own end, Penguins, last year. And now they took...
Because of their goaltending, by the way, that stinks.
Because of many reasons. But they are not... It's not a good team in their own end. And that was an issue last year with them. And now they added Erik Karlsson, who's going to do wonders for them offensively. But if I'm a Penguins fan, I don't think they're going to be a team that can go past the second round of the playoffs this year.
No, I think they're making the playoffs, and even though I think they're old, they're an old team.
They will.
They're an old team. The only thing that worries me about the Penguins this year is the goaltending. There's no consistency there, but adding Erik Karlsson gives them that little budge that they needed in the offseason to make them a team to be talking about. You still have Sidney Crosby there. You still have a Malkin there. You still have Letang there. I mean, this is a good team. This is a good roster. And are they're veterans and they're old and they're not getting any younger. But they're still a team to threaten a lot of these teams in their division and their conference. So I still think the Penguins are going to be a dangerous team. So is that it? Or is that it for our show?
Yeah.
We said an hour. I mean, we went over an hour, but it's our first show. It's the first time I've worked with you, but it was a good one. I mean,
I think we did good.
It started getting better as the show, moved forward. And once we got into hockey, I saw your passion with the Islanders. I understand you're an Islander fan that likes to make excuses. I'm
giving truth.
I used to do that too, man. I'm giving
truth, not excuses.
Who do you think is a better team right now on paper, the Rangers or the Islanders?
Oh, definitely the Rangers.
Okay, I just want to ask you.
The Rangers. I think they can compete with them.
I think the Islanders play well against the Rangers all the time. I'm just asking you who's better, Rangers or the Islanders.
I think out of 100 times this season, if you played it 100 times, I think 70% of the time the Rangers will finish above the Islanders, and 30% the Islanders will finish above the Rangers. I think the difference. I think for third place in the division is going to come down to those last 2 games the Islanders play against the Rangers toward the end of the season.
Do not think that the Islanders are going to be in third place in that division, because they're not. They're a wild card team. They're a wild
Well,
card.
I'm not saying that they're going to, but I think third place is going to come down to those last few games when they play the Rangers towards the
I
end of the
understand, and I know you're a season ticket holder. I know you're an Islander
I
fan,
am,
and
but
that's
I'm not
fine.
being biased.
I respect you, man.
I'm
I
looking
respect.
at what they did from the trade deadline on, and looking at the additions they are having, and looking at 82 games of that.
Mhm.
And I think they will be a better team for a full 82 than they were for the first half of the year last year. If you take those first 56 games they played before the deadline, before the All-Star game, I think the Islanders are a better team in those games with this lineup right now than last year.
They cannot fall behind like they did last year in the first half of the season.
No, they
If they
cannot.
do that with this conference.
Statistically, if they are where they were last year at Thanksgiving, they should not make the playoffs again. They got lucky to get in.
Well, they had Sorokin who got hot, and
the Penguins choked.
Yeah, but they had a hot goaltender. But
They did.
To me, should have been goaltender of the year, Vezina Trophy winner.
Statistically, if you are in a playoff spot at Thanksgiving, you will make the playoffs. That's what the statistics say. And the Islanders were not. And statistically, they should not have made it. They got lucky because towards the end, the Penguins, they choked. They had the chance at the end. The Islanders lost a couple games, and the Penguins were there ahead, and they lost to bad teams. The Penguins choked and allowed the Islanders to get in. That's why they made the playoff. They shouldn't have made it. But if you take the first 56 games this year with the roster they have, I think they will be better positioned by the All-Star break than they were last year. And that's why I think they can have a chance to be near third. I'm not saying they're going to make the top three, but I think they will. I think the last few games against the Rangers, could be a chance for them to get into the top three.
Well, your guess is as good as mine. I still think the Rangers are, besides I think the Devils are the team to beat.
Yeah, they're going to win division.
They're the team to beat with everything that they've done in the offseason, and they're young, they're talented, they have goaltending now. I think they're doing everything right.
Everything's very good. I like him a lot.
They're fantastic. I love what the Devils are doing right now. They're going to be a great team. But if you were to tell me right now, who do I think is going to make the playoffs between the Islanders and the Rangers? I'm picking the Rangers right now. There's nothing.
If them had to not, I would say the Rangers too. The Rangers would make it over the Islanders.
Yeah. Yes, there's nothing that stands out to me right now looking at both rosters and what the Islanders didn't do in the offseason to tell me and sell me that the Islanders are going to make the playoffs this year. That's just my opinion. We'll see what happens. We'll talk more about it next week, my friend.
Yes, we will.
Oh, that's it for our show, ladies and gentlemen. The first show of the Cross Island podcast with me, Errol Marks, my co-host, Lyle Gillen. It's going to be fun throughout the season, the hockey season. As you know, Lyle is an Islander fan, including yours truly. I am an Islander fan too. And I know everybody probably thinks I'm throwing the Islanders under the bus. I'm being honest as an Islander fan. And to me, I saw Lou over the summertime. I asked him a couple of questions about the team, and he looked at me like I had six heads. Okay. But Lou didn't tell me anything that I didn't know. And then he's trying to sell me with Pierre Engvall. That doesn't sell me. Okay. If you're an Islander fan, and
I'm going to make a bet.
You know what would have sold me? You know what would have sold me? Alex DeBrincat. That would have
sold me. I'm going to make a bet with you right now. At the end of the season, Pierre Engvall is going to have the best year of his career.
You want to bet on that? Let's bet. Let's make a bet.
Okay. How about nothing crazy?
Let's make a quick bet. Let's bet a dinner. Let's bet a dinner.
Sure, I'll do a dinner. All
right, we'll bet a dinner.
End of the year, Pierre Engvall's going to have minimum 50 points.
50. That's not a great year. Oh, come on, let's
25 year.
Let's 70 points. Let's 70 points. 70 points.
60.
All right, 60.
We'll meet in the middle.
He needs 30 goals.
No.
Yeah, well, you said his best season was 25, 26.
I'll take that.
What happened?
He has 20-40 with Brock Nelson. I'll take that 100%.
So you're happy with Pierre Engvall on the second line to have 24 goals? That's a good season.
If you look at what he did last year when he was there, I think he can have a very good year with them. I think that is a good year. I think 24 goals and then 36 assists. I think it's a great year.
I beg to differ, but we'll talk more about this next week. Thank you to all the fans out there listening to the first episode of the Cross Island podcast. We will be back next week with me and Lyle.